Hello, my name is Ross Broadstock, the writer of the book Chimeroglyphics, which is a guide and dictionary on how to read Egyptian hieroglyphics the easy way and the correct way. I'll guarantee you, before you even get to the end of this half-hour introductory video, you'll already have a good idea how to read hieroglyphics. And with the help of the dictionary in the back here, or even by working out the words yourself, you'll be able to read hieroglyphic text pretty well already. Never mind your 3-year degree, or if you follow the conventional route, you know, these kind of guys, where it takes 30 years to get a mastery, and even then you kind of guess and work out what it might be. No, this reads like a language should. You see a symbol, it has a meaning, that's it. Same everywhere you see it. Now this was first revealed, to give a little bit of background, by Wilson and Blackett. They started their research in the 1980s, they worked this out. I mean, as far back as the 1790s, people had realised that Welsh could be the source of the language behind the hieroglyphics. Probably because Welsh is actually an ancient Assyrian language which has come all this way and has stayed pretty much unchanged, being stuck on the edge of Europe. Now this book was hard to get hold of, so I paid for it reprinted. I recommend it because it's got a lot there all about Middle Eastern history as well, and as the name suggests, once you can read hieroglyphs, which this book shows, you can then read about biblical characters and other stories that are in the hieroglyphs that are being completely missed. So that shows you how they did it. The big difference is my book shows you how you can do it, and it's really not difficult, and it's a nice easy exercise way. So without further ado, I'll do a little introduction to give a quick overview, give you a good feel for it, and then there's going to be a series of videos hopefully to help us get us through this coronavirus isolation. You can have a new skill. By the end of it you can say, well, at least I've learnt ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Between you and me, you have a pretty good idea within the next 25 minutes. Okay, so without further ado, here we go, straight to the first presentation. Okay, so these are considered to be the two founding fathers of the whole Egyptology subject, hieroglyphics decipherment, the lot. If you're from England, it's Young and Champollion. If you're from France, it's Champollion and Young. It's that kind of rivalry between the two. I would go through this in a lot more detail in a future video about the history of translation. Just to give an idea, Thomas Young, member of the Royal Society, considered the last man who knew everything. He was a genius. Maths, sciences, particularly optics. We tried to work out how the eye saw different colours. Medicine, he was a doctor. The guy was brilliant, and he seemed to be wheeled out to be the English champion to decipher the hieroglyphics. And the key they had was the Rosetta Stone, which had really lighted up this whole craze about Egyptology was going on at the time, and you had to bring things back, and the older the better, and exhibitions are running all over the place. And because Napoleon took his army over there in 1798, and much excitement occurred. So the British were under pressure to crack this. Thomas Young used sort of code-breaking techniques. He used deducement. He didn't know the language, didn't know why the symbols meant what they were, anything like that. But he used mathematics to match up the occurrences of the words in the Greek section compared to the written section, which he called enchoral. It later became demotic, because Champollion chose a different name. So he limited success with that. Since then, it's been shown that, you know, it wasn't that successful. But he admitted and realised very quickly he couldn't work out the hieroglyphics. He seemed to think a different system worked outside the rings than inside them, outside the cartouches than inside them, all sorts of stuff. And he said that without the language, he could take this no further. So though he returned to trying to continue the written part, the enchoral, he gave up on the hieroglyphics. Now, Champollion was in a very different situation. He was considered to be a child savant. He decided before he was even 11 years old that he just knew by inspiration, is how it's recorded in history books. By inspiration, some sort of dream, he knew that Coptic was the language. Coptic was this language, really, of the Coptic Greeks. You know, it was a Christian language brought in round about the 1st century. And the theory was they'd taken this sort of the language that was used in the country and written into a Greek style that applied a writing to what was already spoken. It seems a little bit tenuous, but that's what they're going to go with. There are a few difficulties, one of which
was no one knew what the language sounded like. And one of the principles, as we'll see as we go on, is called the rebus principle, whereby you draw something that sounds like what you want to say. So, for example, the famous Egyptologist Gardner uses an example where he shows a beehive and a leaf and says you've got bee, leaf, belief. That's how you would draw it. So it's a well-accepted principle, the symbols and this idea of phonetics. But how do you do phonetics for the language? You don't know what it sounds like because it's dead language. Anyway, let's see what they did do. So they started with the 3 names that they'd already worked out through where they'd found them and other means. And the first one was Ptolemy's, which Thomas Young gets credit for spotting actually occurs on the Rosetta Stone itself. You can see it. You can go to the British Museum, you can see it there. When you see it, you will also notice that there are other symbols appearing further along. The cartouche is actually bigger than that. But as they didn't know what the rest meant, and they did know this was Ptolemy's, they sort of stopped there. With Cymrogliffics now, we can now read the rest of it, and it tells us more about him, which is the key to a lot of this, because they were working on them just being sounds, and we'll see how they came to that conclusion. So, if you've got Ptolemy's, it begins with a P, and over here we've got Cleopatra, also with a P. Excellent, we've got a match. Are there any other matches? Yes, the lion, L. So we've got L in Ptolemy's, L in Alexander, L in Cleopatra. So it definitely sees we've got 3-way connection. We've got the bird, and there's a couple of others. Now then, so they realised there's onto some sort of connection. The symbols could represent sounds. What they tragically didn't realise was actually all of these represent words. And when the name comes about, what's really being done is they're using the initials. Much like, say, you had NATO. You can say the word NATO, and if you're looking from a future civilization, you can see a N, an A, a T, and an O, or O. What you wouldn't realise is that it says North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, and that's what's going on here. All of these are words, and sometimes use the rebus principle, where you use a sounds like, or use the root of the word. They had no idea of any of this. So as an example, the first word we come up begins with a P. Now, because Champollion convinced everyone it had to be Coptic, they had a problem, because they worked out this was a door, and you'll see some future pictures in the clear version with the lines. By the way, some are dark, some are light. It's more to do with the material it's printed on, or carved, or written. It doesn't seem to have any significance beyond that. So this is a door, and I have to say, these early pioneers were fantastic at working out what everything was. You know, this is a speaking mouth. This is a door, inspired without knowing the language. Once you know, you can use Welsh and see what they are. It's a lot easier. But they did this, and we're using 99% exactly the definitions that they came up with. They said this is a door or entrance. In Welsh, you got drws, commonly known, yes, but you also have porth. Porth meaning entrance or gateway. And a harbour can be a porth. You got Porth north of Pontypridd. So particularly in the old dictionaries, you find this is the word for entrance. So that explains the P, the P. What we also have is the root of porth is por, the first 3 letters. And por is the supreme one. Then we have this, which they didn't really know what this is. But this is a representation of the old-fashioned Welsh cakes they used to cook on the plates in front of the fire. And the old grannies, everyone would know these. And it's called Titian Lap. Now the T, the TI part, means you are. So the beginning of this is supreme one, you are. And we'll see the whole word in a minute, and you can see how it reads out. So this was, if they'd known the language, they could have solved this in no time. When Wilson Blackett attempted it, within about 20 minutes, they were reading the names and words and stuff. It was fantastic. And you can learn it quickly as well. So the other things they should have noticed are the mismatches. And that's always the key when understanding things. Don't think of things as a mistake. If you find a problem, don't ignore it or pretend it's not there. Explore it, because that's usually where the clues are. And there's one big clue here. Cleopatra is spelt with this, the back of the hand, you know, the threat, a fist. You know, that sort of that pose when you're going to slap someone across the face or something with the back of your hand, or a fist. Either way, it's the same thing. It's in Welsh you got the dwrd and you got dwrdio, which is to threaten or to chide. Great word, chide, in the old dictionaries. Now, Cleopatra should be spelt with a T. Now we've got a T right here. We know there's a T from Ptolemy. This one comes before Cleopatra. So if they wanted to use a T, why don't they just use this? Why did they use a D? Why did they use a D? I will explain why in a minute. But unfortunately, well, I'll explain it now actually, because it makes more sense then. This is to chide. This is the mouth proclaiming, which in Welsh is roch. So you've got to threaten and proclaim. You know, this is what rulers do. This is how you run a country. You threaten and you order. And this is very powerful because you'll see this in other cartouches and you'll see it in general text when it shows someone is a ruler. Yeah? It's to threaten and to proclaim. Now, you can see it in Alexandros, works very well. So they put it in Cleopatra because the D and the T sounds almost the same. You can look in the dictionary, there's no really good T word they could have used that wouldn't mess up this sentence, because this has a meaning when you read it through as well, as we'll come to, as does Alexandros. The other thing, which is bizarre when you look at it, was they decided, because they ended up with Alexandros, that there were no vowels in hieroglyphics. It's just bizarre when you look at it, because the first word deciphered, Ptolemy's, where you got an O as a vowel, I would call it a double E. That's a single E. It's a double E. Why it becomes Y in the conventional, or E, I don't know, is strange, really. But anyway, 1 or 2 vowels when you look at it, or 3. Cleopatra is full of vowels. E, O, A, 4 vowels. Alexandros, it's not because it's a time thing or a recent invention. It begins with a vowel. So the idea of no vowels is crazy. And what you'll find, once you look at the Welsh words and the roots, like this one, for example, roch, gives you the ro sound, which is by the Alexandros. And this is actually the one I use here because this is to proclaim. You know, we've got this, remember, we've got the chide and proclaim. And this is certainty. This is sikrai. It's the fastening bolt they use to hold the big stones together. Sikrai. So, ros. So, as you might have seen, that's the symbols I use for my name. My name is Ross. So I have Ros, which is to proclaim with certainty, which I really like, of course. So you can look through all this, and there's all meanings. Another thing they might have noticed is if this is an S, then why is that an S? Sorry, they're both the same, but this one isn't. Why not use the same one again? Well, this is because these are words, and they have slightly different meanings. Now, unfortunately, a couple of disastrous assumptions were made at this early stage, which, I would say has caused 200 years of going down the wrong route and millions of hours of effort to try and make this increasingly complicated system work. Because if you're trying to make words out of letters, when you look at the general text, when you got words making sentences and you think they're letters forming words, you've already got a big problem. The only way you can make it work is to start fiddling it, really. So one of the things that happened is that Champollion made an assumption that the same symbol can mean different things in different places. So yeah, it's a D here, it's a T there, rather than realise there's a D there as well. That, what seemingly small assumption, changed the whole history of hieroglyphics. Because from then on, you have situations where the same symbol can be made to mean anything. So the general approach is get a piece of text, try and work out what you think it means, and then make the hieroglyphics fit. So you end up with determinators, and some it's just decoration, all sorts of reasons to explain why these hieroglyphics are appearing in the order they do. Whereas with hieroglyphics, you just read it like a sentence, because each one is a word, not a sound. The sounds just come when you're making a word out like this. That was a massive assumption, which caused, disastrous problems, really. And the other one was, of course, which already implied, is that in the same way as you use sounds here, Thomas Young said you cannot use the same system outside in the text. It does not work. But Champollion was so convinced he had to make it work, and you end up with the sort of gobbledygook, some of these words you see with lots of consonants all in a row and no vowels. And then you're allowed to just add a vowel. What the very famous Egyptologist, possibly the most famous beyond Champollion, is Budge from the British Museum. He called them vowels of convenience. You could put a vowel in to make the word easier to pronounce and easier to remember. Like one example is we go on to a lot of these names. One is Ptah, the god, and they had a P, a T, and an H. Pt. So some Greek academic just put an A in because Ptah sounded like a Greek word, and that was that. No reason for it to be there. Actually, as you know from looking at the beginning of Ptolemy here, it's the same one, same two symbols. You see a Ptah. The third symbol is actually an S, which we'll come on to, and it means brisk or vigorous. So supreme one, you are vigorous, and you pronounce it portis or portici. So there you go, another example, and we'll come on to more of those. Now, the thing with Coptic, I'll do more of this on the history, is that it was a dead language. It hadn't been spoken for hundreds of years. There's a few religious chants going on and stuff, but nothing that understood the language, much in the same way as many Catholics would worship in Latin without knowing what the language meant or really how to say it properly. So anyway, he resurrected this language and he decided how everything should be spoken. He was a Jesuit priest, an amazing genius of a man, published 20, 30 books, history of China, all sorts. He had his Jesuit priests all around the world sending back information. He was compiling it into books. Amazing. But even he said Coptic has no relation to the native language of Egypt. Now, in the 1790s in Wales, people already noticed that almost as soon as Egyptology started, that a lot of the words matched the Welsh words. And that syntax we talk about, with the word order changing, matched Welsh. And completely independently, von Bunsen, who was an academic in Germany, or Prussia it was in those days, he came to the conclusion that the hieroglyphics are written in a form of ancient Assyrian. And this ancient Assyrian was a root of nearly all what he called Indo-European languages. And you can see traces of it all over the place. Sanskrit, the Latin languages, French. You'll see it everywhere. But the one place where it survived unchanged was right on the edge of Europe, whereas as he worded it himself, he was jealously guarded by the Welsh, and the language did stay very much unchanged until very recently. So as long as you get a dictionary that's a few hundred years old, and you can get these online for Welsh, you can find the words and they work. So here's the first one, just look at it a bit closer, Ptolemy's. So here we have the conventional sounds they attributed, and here you see the Cumbroglyphics. So it's very similar because we both know what the word's supposed to be. The big difference here is with this lion, where you've got the le, because you've got lleu for lion, so you've got le, you've got the e as well. Okay, and much like French, and we'll see examples in a minute, if there's a consonant next, it's le, so you've got lem, Ptolemys. And if this is a vowel, same as you do in the French, you'd knock out the e, basically an apostrophe type situation. So you say, le for the in French. You don't say le enfant, you say l'enfant. So it's the same thing here. If this was a vowel, you see an example in a minute, that's not required, and it drops to an L. It just works. Let's have a look. So here's the name written out in full. So we start off, there's the door. You can see the version, which is a bit more clear. There is a door as well. Oh, just to mention, all these hieroglyphics, I've redrawn them from scratch and all the portraits and everything. So if you want to use them, help yourself. Please give the mention to my name or Cumbroglyphics, but please, you can use them. I'm trying to encourage this, spread the word. Right, so the first letter of it's a door. The Welsh word is porth. First letter pa. So if you're spelling the name out, you got on your way to getting Ptolemy's. The root word or the intended word is por, which is supreme one. So we say we've got the situation here now. Supreme one you are, because the Welsh syntax, like Yoda from Star Wars, you don't say good boy in Welsh, you say back in there. That's the way the Welsh language works, which is another clue to this being Welsh being the root language behind the hieroglyphs, because the word order works as well as the words working. Everything works. It's a fit. There's also appears to be 7 vowels in hieroglyphs in the language used, and there's 7 vowels in Welsh. W and Y are also vowels. So we work through this. So what we get, supreme one you are, and then we have successor, abundance of the abundant place, Egypt, the place of abundance. He is the established. So he's permanent. He's unchallenged. Now this is another big key to this. This is the double. The fact we've got 2 E's. It's not a Y, it's 2 E's. Now, what Wilson and Blackett noticed is a bit of genius. Is every time you see 2 of something, in this case it's the 2 corn, which is the which is he is or she is. Well, you also see it for two other things. And what it means is it clicks onto the dual meanings that you see in Welsh. They're sort of sounding the same, the homophones. So, for example, in Welsh, un, dwy, tri, 1, 2, 3. Dwy is God, dwy is two. They're almost the same. It's just a little shuffle of the letters here. You see a very similar thing again in French, funny enough. If you count in French, un, deux, trois, and God is Dieu. Sounds very much like deux, Dieu. So two represents a God, written supreme here. It could be the God or, the ultimate authority. That's the word we're looking at. Sometimes you'll see two lines, which represents the land. So it'd be the supreme one or the God of that land. You see it on some of the Ramesses cartouches. So this is a very important thing. Another proof that Welsh is a possible language here. It doesn't work in English, for example. You've got two God. They don't sound at all similar. So you can read that, and that gives you a description of Ptolemy's. He's the supreme one, successor. He is the successor to the abundant placed, and he's unchallenged. Fantastic. Right, on to Alexandros. And here is another massive clue, and one which really should have shone out to people much longer ago, and that's Alex. There's no X. There doesn't appear to be any X in the language used for hieroglyphics. In the same way, there is no X in Welsh. Use the K and the S combined. See the X for Alex. You see that still today in modern Wales. Here is a sign. I think it's outside a hospital. Taxis in English with an X. No X in Welsh. X. Taxi. That's how you do it. So this has been shining out for 200 years. Every time you look at the Alexandros cartouche, you can see the there should be no X in the language you're looking at. Another big clue to Welsh. So we go through Alexandros, and you'll see here the pledge, the abundance of deity. Now, I have to remember, one thing to bear in mind is that this is a Greek or Macedonian name. It's not a native Egyptian name. And you can see when we look at all of these Greek names like Ptolemy's, Cleopatra, Alexandros, you can see that they had some problems making it work, such as having to use the cut to make an X sound. And you see a couple of other little fiddles as we go through it, which is further proof of this is the correct language. And you have the same difficulties in Welsh when you're trying to produce these words. So we just run through it there. You can go through all these, all in the dictionary, and we'll go through the names in more detail in future. So he's the deity. It's pledged. There it is again. Begin the sentence. You'll see this a lot in the text. It's almost like a full stop in reverse. Full stop comes at the end of the sentence. This comes at the beginning. So we have the pledge that he is the established deity of abundance. He preserves, so he protects, preserves, keeps safe. And here we have it. We mentioned it already. He chides and proclaims. He's the commander. He's the ruler, the certain ruler. This is a fasting bowl, sikrai. So he keeps safe and he rules with certainty. So that's your Alexandros translation. Fantastic. Now, one of the things I want to point out there, just to remake that point about the and the fact that there are no missing vowels. See, they're there, they're part of the sounds. Now, an interesting thing with hieroglyphics, and again, this is where you see anomalies and should stop and ask questions, why the anomalies? Not think they're just mistakes or artistic things or something like that. Because quite often you see Alexandros' cartouche with an extra appearing. It should be a massive clue to these Egyptologists that yes, there are vowels. Sometimes you see it like this. So then you got Alexandros. Yeah, same thing. So what we do here with the L, I'll make it a bit clearer in a second. The E has been removed. You don't need it now because the vowel is there. Sometimes you even see it with two. And there's various examples of this. Do a Google search, find the images. You'll find them slightly different in different places. So what we have here, and demonstrates it, just like the French, the is now not required. So it becomes just becomes L. Alex, same with this, it was Se, now it's just Alexandros, and you know what that reads as. It's when I first read that book, Moses and the Hieroglyphs, and saw this coming to life, I was just mind blown. I had to read it again, and again. I spent over a year just researching this and going through all the translations, all the symbols. It's mind blowing. I mean, I'd spent so much of my life learning the conventional system, been to Egypt, read loads of books, gone through the dictionaries, the explanations. It was so complicated. I just thought I must be stupid or something. But then you start to think, why would a writing system be so complicated? The whole idea of this writing was plastered over the outsides of temples and things. It's on documents. They want, as Alan Wilson puts it, they want everyone to see what a big boy they were, you know? They want to read about their conquests and their greatness and their all-power. And also, if you're writing a papyrus, you know, a scroll, and you're sending it to someone, you can't send something with 12 different possible meanings and interpretations and context, and just be ridiculous. And where would you get your scribes from if it took decades to learn it? No, this system is so straightforward. It's even easier to learn than English. If you speak the correct language, you haven't got to learn an alphabet. You know a lion is a slough, and slough is the other word for it. You just read it. You just say it out loud. It's like a picture dictionary. It's that brilliant, and it works in the text as well. So we come to Cleopatra, the third one, and you can see it there, and we'll see what all these mean. And just an example of some of the different layouts. Oh, one thing I should have mentioned, this one reads that way, right to left, and this one reads that way. And the clue seems to be very consistent, is whichever way the animals or birds are pointing, takes you to the start. Okay? So in this case, they're pointing that way, and we're reading this way. And we see it's slightly different. And so you got the ka, la, as an ah. So it's cla, a, o, pudra. Pudra. Cla, pudra. Slightly different there. And this is as it's drawn in the copy in the Louvre. And you can see look it up, it's in the book as well, but if you go on Google and find out how they translate it, it's quite bizarre how they get around this. So anyway, you can see with Cleomaglyphics, Cleopatra reads the same. You've got Cleopatra here. The slight difference can be explained when you look at how the sentence is formed. And now by putting it there, it makes the sentence a little bit easier to read. There you go. Either way it works, and it's brilliant. And it shows you, even when you jumble them around, you can still work it out using this. And there, of course, this DR together, and they're together there. Very important, because that digniplates ruler. So what you've got here, the way they've arranged it, is you've got the supreme ruler. So I think they've just rearranged it to get a nice column like that. Supreme ruler. That's a very powerful combination. Okay, have a little look at that. Right, so there you go. You can read all about Cleopatra now. Glorious, abundant she is, successor to the Supreme One. And there's the pledge again. She rules. And they've had to put an extra pledge on the end, which grammatically isn't great. And you can see why in the other one they've changed it slightly to try and get around that. But you can't really, because if you don't put an at on the end, it's going to read Cleopatra. Because it's a roh. We have to put a vowel there to cancel that o. So if you look through it, there's not really a suitable A you can use. So this is an example here of a slight fudge that they've had to do to make a foreign word, or foreign name work. I would suggest if she was a native Egyptian name, this would have been a D from the start, and that would have been an O, and she could have been Cleopatra, and then you wouldn't have to put the bird in at all then. Anyway, that's a slight side. We'll come on to the names in more detail. You have great fun working those out, and just as much fun doing your own name, and other people's names can be really good fun, because there's a choice for each letter or each sound you want to use when spelling a name. There's a choice of words you can use, quite a big choice. So you can make yourself sound fantastic, and you can also have a bit of fun with other people's names. Anyway, so the cartoons I did for the book. No Cleopatra. They did not do Cleopatra's. It was not a spelling mistake, all right? It was done to emphasize that she was a ruler, okay? So it's quite important to notice that. Okay, so come to the end for this one. Just want to give you a flavour so you can see it's so concrete how it works. It's so logical. It's like a real language. You can pick it up so quickly. Once you know what all the symbols are, that's the only learning process. You know, if you knew the language, you know, if you were brought up in ancient Egypt, it'd be dead easy. So there it is. Oh, one thing. So we're going to go on to the most amazing part for me is the pictograms. We see these wonderful drawings. And then you'll notice that the way the clothing is presented and with sandals, you translate all these words into Welsh and you can work out what the whole picture means. Like sometimes that famous picture where they've got a bull's head on the head of the pharaoh, so it looks like a bull. I'll show it in the later video. And the horns, well, horn in Welsh is coron, which also gives you crown. So the horn represents the ruler. And because you've got two horns, you've got the double crown, which is the supreme ruler. And you go around the eyes and you can see they've got 3 eyebrows, and that's tree in Welsh, which leads you to know it's fantastic. I'm exploding trying to do it. And I spent a year putting the book and dictionary together, and I really want to share it on these videos, and you'll be mind blown. I'm just going to leave you one little teaser before we go on to the rest, and that is these two, which appeared on the Paris one. These appear quite a lot as a combination. One of the videos I'm going to do is titles for people, you know, Lord and all that kind of stuff, because they all have little combinations and message. There's some which are repeated a lot, and you can see exactly what they mean. This one only appears next to female names, sometimes outside the cartouche, but this time it's inside. Now we know already this is you are, and this tells you something about the ruler or female ruler. So the blank you are. So have a look at that and see what you think that shape might be. And that'll tell you how you can tell a female ruler, which comes in quite handy sometimes when you're not sure what the name is. So anyway, so lots of fun with that. I hope you enjoyed it. It really is fun. It's not a real brain ache 3-year degree course. It's just learn to read by looking at pictures, just like if you're a 3-4-year-old. It's so much fun. So I hope you bear with me through the whole course. We're going through this coronavirus thing at the moment. So I'm going to try and put one up every day. And when we come through all this, you can at least see I can now read Egyptian hieroglyphics. So, traditions of YouTube say peace at the end. It's become a bit of a watchword. So as we've been using the Welsh language so much, I'd like to wish that to all of you in these difficult times. And close with the word heddwch,